And now, like, social media is the first place people tend to go rather than having a quiet word, picking up the phone, maybe sending an email. It tends to be on there, and then you're in full view of the public and it's amplified.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Noel Kavanagh, and today I have the great pleasure of sharing with you that Dental Protection will be hosting the Australia and New Zealand Spotlight on Risk Dental Conference on the 27th of May. This conference is first and foremost for our Dental Protection members, but I should also add that any dental practitioner is able to join free of charge. So if you haven't already registered, do look in the podcast description for a link to register. Now, in today's podcast, you'll be hearing from a new host, Dr. David Crum. David is the Director of Indemnity Services at New Zealand Dental Association based in Auckland. David, absolutely delighted you're able to join us.
Yeah, hi there, Noel, and thanks for that welcome. I think I'm looking forward to this thing called podcasting. I've had no experience at this, so I hope it's not complete chaos from here on in.
I've no doubt it won't be, David. Thank you very, very much. And thanks again for agreeing to host this podcast. I know you're going to be chatting to one of the conference speakers. So without further ado, I'll pass the baton over to your good self now to introduce our guests for today.
Yeah, right. Well, you're absolutely right in that. Today we'll be hearing from Dr. Karen Sutherland. Karen is a social media and public relations educator, a researcher and a consultant with more than 20 years industry experience in marketing, public relations and communication roles. She's worked with organisations such as the ABC TV, Fremantle Media and the Australian Red Cross Blood Service. As Noel said, Karen will be speaking at the Dental Protection Conference in May, and her topic will be credibility, reputation, and the risk for us, dental practitioners, in social media use. As a dental protection case manager, I can say we definitely see difficult scenarios arising from the use of social media. So Karen, I'm really keen to hear your perspective on this topic, and it's wonderful to have you with us today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show.
I guess we should probably launch straight into this, and I'm going to give you a bit of forewarning as to what I want to get us to do in the next 10 minutes or so. It's a relatively short podcast. There's three things. First, I want to learn a little bit more about you, your path and your expertise. Secondly, I'd like to hear what you will be talking about at the conference. Give us a sort of a teaser, spark some interest in the topic and attendance at the conference. And then thirdly, I guess, and probably the most important thing, is I want to connect this subject to us as dentists. I want to find out what the real relevance is in terms of what you're speaking about at the conference. So let's get straight into this and head back to that first point. For our listeners, do you think you could start by just telling us a little bit about your area of expertise, particularly in connection to social media?
Yes, well, I began in communication, and you already said some of the places that I worked, and I worked in sort of communications and marketing. I started in media, and so my journey, when I look back now, it looks a bit sort of all over the place, but now I can see how I actually got to do what I'm doing. And so started in television, and then worked in the nonprofit sector and went into corporate, and then started studying more about marketing as well. And then I ended up in the education sector, higher ed, as a marketing manager and communications manager there. And then I became really interested in research. I was a research communications manager. I learned what research was, and then I got a real passion for it and decided I wanted to do a PhD. And it took me a little while to work out on what, but when I found it, I thought, aha, that's it. My thesis was all about trying to find ways that nonprofit organisations could connect better using social media with their donors and volunteers. And so that was my passion for 4 years. And then that led me to begin teaching at university and designing courses and workshops for businesses all around the world. And well, I'm still doing that. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of the Sunshine Coast. I now also co-own a digital marketing agency called Dharana Digital, where we actually focus on helping people working in the health and wellness space with their social media and also their search engine optimization and web and that sort of thing. And so what we like to do is actually empower our clients to help other people. And so, Yeah, so that's how I ended up where I am. It's been a long journey, but I love social media. I love all the things it can do in the positive way, but also learning about how to navigate the negatives, which I think is really what this presentation is going to be about at the conference.
Yeah, thanks for that. And of course, the negatives go across the whole spectrum, I suppose, of social media, and particularly for somebody of my age, a dentist who's been in practice 40 years, social media is a bit of a mystery in some respects. But of course, it's such an important part of modern day practice, particularly for younger practitioners in this day and age. So let's just explore the topic itself. See if we can spark some interest in terms of the headlines, the overview, the sorts of things that you will be talking about at the Dental Protection Conference in May.
Absolutely. So we're going to focus on, we're looking at the benefits because there are benefits, but then we also need to look at some of the areas that we have to be mindful of and the risks associated with using it. Social media is powerful, and that can be powerful in a positive way in terms of growing your business and helping your community, but it can also be powerful in amplifying the negatives as well. So we're just looking at ethical ways to use it. We're looking at ways that, if, for example, if you receive a negative review, how to handle that. Also, if you want to use testimonials, the best way of doing that in an ethical way around getting consent and those sorts of things. So there are really great ways to use social media. However, there has to be ways and regulations around how you actually use it, just so I guess everyone is protected in what they're doing and using it in, the best practices way.
The things that I've seen in terms of dental protection and looking after dentists who find themselves in a bit of trouble because of their social media, and I'll just use this as sort of a segue into the topic itself, I guess. There's two things that I see reasonably often, and the first is the one you've already mentioned, and that's the practitioner angst and disappointment and frustration caused by a bad Google review. And I guess a lot of the angst comes from the unfairness of and perhaps lack of knowledge of how to respond, knowing that it's going to a very broad audience. So it's that Google review aspect. And then the other is the dental chat room conversations that I see between practitioners, the conversations of ego versus ego, and in some respects. And there's a sort of a commonality across both those two things of the warrior aspect, the sort of the online warrior and the crossing of boundaries quite quickly. So I'll just mention those things because that's what I see. But I'll ask you to give us your view on what really goes wrong for dentists in terms of social media.
I think it can be around sort of reacting rather than responding. I think sometimes, because no one likes to receive a negative review, particularly when you think it's actually unfair. And so I think sometimes, and I think we're all guilty of it sometimes, of just reacting rather than sitting back and thinking of the best way around that. So I think, and once it's on the internet, it's there. It's there forever. Really, you can delete it, but it's still there. The other thing is, I guess, making promises that you can't 100% actually unequivocally say that you can achieve. I think that's can be another issue as well, sort of around sort of ethical promotion of your services as well, and using your clients as content as well, which is great a lot of clients love being used in that way. But again, it's around having those processes and procedures in place to make sure that you do it where everyone is agreeable and they've signed off on it and they're happy to do that, because those things can actually come back to bite you in a really big way if you don't cover yourself.
Are you saying that at times you've seen the social media being used to create expectations that the practitioner then can't meet, and that's really starts the problem with the patient not meeting the expectations that they've seen through the other cases perhaps that have been demonstrated on websites or social media?
I think that can happen sometimes. Absolutely. It's not always the case. I think working with clients, generally, you have to really manage expectations from the beginning and from the beginning of the consultation, just to make sure that everyone's on board with what the results may or may not be. But yeah, I think that can happen sometimes if someone's seen something, a post where they think, I want that too. And then they come in and it's not, they can't actually have that. And then their disappointment they share online. And now, like, social media is the first place people tend to go, rather than having a quiet word, picking up the phone, maybe sending an email. It tends to be on there, and then you're in full view of the public and it's amplified. So yeah, so it's thinking about how you can minimize that sort of risk of that happening by really providing really superior customer service as well is a great way to reduce that risk, and thinking of all the things that could go wrong in that consultation and trying to come up with ways to sort of manage it. And of course, there's the off chance that some people just react and there's nothing you can do about that. But I guess then having a process in place to think about how you'll respond to that in sort of a more, I guess, strategic way rather than reacting.
Yeah, it's that, it's partly frustration and angst, isn't it, about that perceived size of the audience that's hearing the argument that's going on, whereas in the past, of course, it was between you and your patient in the surgery. And, there's a perception around that can be quite damaging to people's reputations and credibility as a result. Is there any other comment that you'd like to make in terms of the sorts of things that you'll cover in the conference?
Yeah, well, I don't want it to be all sort of doom and gloom. I also want to show some really great examples of people dentists doing it really well, and looking also at the opportunities. So not just the risks, but also the opportunities of social media, because as I said, it is powerful, but it can be powerful in a positive and a negative way. So it'll be a balanced presentation. So while we'll navigate and work through some of the issues that can arise, we'll also show some solutions as well. So it will end on a very positive note. So yeah, so that's what I plan to do.
Well, absolutely, and thank you. I just think it's been great hearing from you today, and I'm looking forward to hearing more at the conference. I mean, you're one of a number of really good speakers that we've got in the lineup on the 27th of May, and I am asking dental protection members and other dental staff within your practices to listen in to what will be a very interesting event. So thank you, Karen. Thanks for what you've said to us this evening, and I'm looking forward to listening to you at the conference.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you both. I mean, that has certainly whetted my appetite listening. I think it's a fascinating topic. And as Karen was speaking there, for us dentists and clinicians, when Karen was talking about social media and, the fact that it's very powerful, there's great potential with it, but it needs to be handled with care. And I couldn't help but thinking it's probably, as I was saying, for us dentists, a little bit like a dental fast handpiece, that it's very useful, very powerful, but we need to be careful with it and handle it with care. So I certainly hope to catch a few hours of this conference. I'm actually based in Kilkenny in the southeast of Ireland, so I think you're about 10 hours ahead of me. But yeah, certainly, I'm definitely going to tune in. And I should also mention, actually, that Dental Protection will have recordings available shortly after the conference, so for anyone not able to make it on the 27th. So just quickly again, the conference is online, it's free, and it's going to be great, so please do register using the link in the podcast description. Well, it's time to say a big thank you again to both Karen and David. Thank you for listening, and goodbye for now.